Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. The board will be here momentarily. They're just finishing up closed session.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors for June 8th, 2022. This meeting is, we're kicking it off. So we'll go ahead and approve the agenda by acclamation. And June, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Abarca,
Present.
Ms. Buckner, Ms. Cortez,
Here.
Ms. Ford,
Here.
Mr. Hogan,
Here.
Dr. Jones,
Present.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, June. And now I'm going to turn it back over to you for a review of the old action items.
All action items have been resolved in last week's Friday update.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, with that being said, Dr. Bedell, I'm going to turn it over to you for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is one of the meetings where we get an opportunity to recognize our scholar superstars, terrific teammates, outstanding administrators, and community champions. And we're just excited. So I think, is it Ms. Moxley, or no, Ms. Alvarez, who will come up and present the scholar superstars, and Mr. Hogan and I will make our way down for pictures.
Okay, are you guys ready? We ready? We're ready to share some love to our KCPS family here. So we're gonna start with our scholar superstar, and today we have 3. So we want to invite up Valencia Jones. Valencia Jones. Valencia is a 3rd grader at Garcia who excels academically in all content areas. In addition to being an amazing scholar, she also has wonderful behavior in the classroom. She participates in class and is always up for the challenge. Ms. Pagel, who nominated her, says that Valencia is a strong leader and has a bright future ahead of her. Sorry. Perfect. Congratulations. And Mom, if you want to come up and take pictures, you can come up and take pictures with her as well. Mom, principal, the person that nominated her, all her support system. If you guys want to come up here very quickly to take a quick picture. No, you're in the picture. You need. Yep. All right. 3, 2, 1. Oh, look at her first. Oh, I love it. Okay. Congratulations. Thank you. Okay, next we have Marie Horn. Marie, if you want to come up here, please. Marie is an 8th grader at Central Middle who is known to be an outstanding artist who has worked hard on learning how to finish what she starts in art. This accomplishment has led her to win 1st place in the district's Fine Arts Showcase and a grand prize winner in the district's envelope contest. She has a beautiful personality and has blossomed as an artist and as a student this year. Miss Brown, who nominated her, says that she has no doubt that she will continue doing wonderful things in high school. Congratulations. And Mom, if you want to come take a picture. Love it. Congratulations. Ooh. And lastly, we have Gabrielle Kaysen. Miss Gabrielle is a 2nd grader at Hartman Elementary who is being recognized today for being our spokesperson on enrollment for KCPS on the radio. Gabriel, she wasn't afraid to make mistakes and try again, and she's a great example of how resilient our students can be. So congratulations. She's also a straight A student. We'll get your autograph next. Lynn, we have a few more.
Yep.
She's waiting. She's waiting. She's waiting.
I'm waiting.
She's waiting.
I know, Grandma.
We have some time. You're okay. You have time. All right. You ready?
All right. Awesome. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
I'm just snapping. So,
Awesome.
congratulations. Oh, one more. One more. You got it?
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. Got it.
Congratulations. This belongs to. Thank you. And now we're moving on to our terrific teammates. So our first terrific teammate of the night is Miss Carmen Chuox. Miss Chuox made sure that we get all the pictures today. But she is nominated by Nicole Gradam, and she is the library media specialist at Northeast High. And she's nominated because she's always given several tasks on top of her work and always accomplishes at the highest level. The great thing about Ms. Chuox is that she can not only complete each task at hand, but ensures every task is done with excellence. She works with our students to assure they are successful in the classroom and ensures all of our admins, teachers, and staff are taken care of. I truly enjoy working alongside her as a terrific teammate, says Nicole Gradam. So congratulations. Ms. Chuox was also my Spanish teacher at some point, so I made sure that I did good today. No, en español? Yes. She has to check those pictures, guys. We have to get it right. You know? All right, are we ready?
All right, here we go.
Mine first and then Liz. 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Congratulations. I don't know whose phone this is. ¿Es tuyo? ¿Es tuyo? Oh, okay, never mind. Okay. Our next terrific teammate of the night. If this, nope. Is Kimberly Hester. Kyle? Oh, perfect, thank you. Kimberly Hester. She was nominated by Crystal Everett, and she is a CTE instructional coach at Manual Tech. She's nominated because she's the ultimate teammate. Last year, she was charged with serving as a district internship coach and has been instrumental in pushing the program forward. She handles the day-to-day details of the internship program, finding student questions and getting fingerprints and making sure students attend orientation. With her as a teammate, the district internship program has more than doubled. One of the projects that has been birthed from the district internship program in 21 was the idea to host a student-led conference. And 1 year later, that idea is coming to fruition and under her leadership. I know that meeting with students on Saturday is no easy feat, but she is doing it all very well. She is a terrific teammate. Congratulations. Then we have our outstanding administrators. And so we have two that are kind of joined today. So we have Ms. Ramonda Franklin Hamilton and Ms. Bridget Crutchfield. They were both nominated by Michelle Pendemes. Michelle says that when the pandemic struck and the decision was made to serve all KCPS students through distance learning platforms, Ramonda and Bridget led the charge to serve all of our students, our most vulnerable Head Start students, in person. They identified 30 students, 3 classrooms at each site, whose parents were considered essential workers, and they were instrumental in creating all of the safety precautions, handbooks, and COVID response protocols that influenced the direction that the district would take as the year rolled on. While everyone else worked remotely, Ramonda and Bridget arrived every day to greet their children and families without hesitation, without complaint, and often without help. They supported teachers and families throughout COVID outbreaks, working beyond their hours. They have been outstanding in all they do. Congratulations. Yes, they do. No, oh. Yep, yep.
All right, here we go. All right, one more. Got it.
It's on video, so. All right, I have a video.
You can screenshot that. It'll work. It'll work. Congratulations. Next we have Dr. Jimmy Ballard, who's the principal at Longfellow and Banneker Elementary. Dr. Ballard was nominated by Kinney Park, and she's nominated because Dr. Ballard has taken unprecedented assignments and has somehow managed to make it look easy. Doesn't she make it look easy? As a principal of 2 KCPS buildings, she continues to have a positive and passionate attitude every single day. She engages with staff and students constantly, and her door is always open. On days that she is at Longfellow, her office door is constantly being invaded by staff and students who want to connect with her, and she has the energy and care to connect with each one of them. She expects greatness from her staff and cares about each and every one of them. After working in 4 different elementary schools, Mr. Park can honestly say that he has not worked for anyone who pushes him or supports him like she does. Dr. Ballard is completely and undeniably outstanding. Congratulations.
Okay, all right. Here we go.
Let me get out of your way.
There you go. We ready? Okay, we're good. All right, here we go. All right, perfect. Congratulations.
Congratulations. And lastly, we have our community champion, and today it goes to Jewish Vocational Services. We have Megan Fanning, the youth program manager here. So we started the Community Champion Award to recognize and express gratitude for sustained and extraordinary services provided by our partners to our school and our system. Through the highs and lows of refugees, resettlement, and domestic and foreign policies, JVS has provided critical services and support to our most underserved students and communities. Through their flexibility, resourcefulness, and advocacy, we have collaborated to serve refugee and immigrant families and students. Together, we work together to identify and address gaps in services and create programming that is responsive to community need. When hundreds of Afghan families made Kansas City their home, JVS partnered with KCPS to host hotel schools and mobile enrollment. When we enrolled over 20 Afghan girls at East High School that they had never had the opportunity to go to school before, the JVS team created and continues to lead a support group for them to ensure they are comfortable and successful. As more unaccompanied youth from Central America had fled to Kansas City, JVS created a team dedicated to supporting those students and their educational goals by partnering with us. When schools and departments need interpretation and translations, we turn to JVS. We truly could not do the work that we do without Jewish Vocational Services and their commitment to our students, families, and staff. They are a true community champion. Thank you. Do you want to, Megan, do you want to say anything? Do you have any words? I didn't want to push her, but. Yeah, you can. Or live streaming.
I want to say thanks on behalf of Jewish Vocational Service. We also have, I feel like I have to give a shout out to Della Lamb, who's the other refugee resettlement agency in Kansas City. So I'm the manager of the youth team, and we have the Central American program, and we have a mentoring program, we have a therapy program. So the biggest shout out is for KCPS, because this year we've enrolled close to 300 kids, new kids, just this school year, from Afghanistan, from Sudan, from Congo, but the vast majority have been from Afghanistan. So another shout out to Language Services. They've been amazing, and we did do mobile enrollment, and we partnered to come up with this idea of serving kids in the hotel, because even JVS, we only got about a 2-day notice back in November when we got our first 150 Afghans that arrived to Kansas City. So we were trying to reduce the amount of time that kids would spend in the hotel, not in school. And I'd say every parent I talked to said the reason why we're here is for our kids and for their education. So we immediately started talking to Language Services and our partners here to say, what can we do to get kids enrolled with KCPS as fast as possible? So 90% of the kids that we've seen in the last 6 months have all gone to KCPS, and it's been a crazy experience for you guys. And another shout out to Faxon, that all of a sudden got a huge amount of Afghan kids when they had none before, because that was the school that we routed them to from the hotel. I could go on and on and on, and I won't. But we wouldn't exist as a program if it wasn't for the district. And you guys gave us our first shot to start to do therapy in school with kids. And now we have offices at Global Academy and East and Northeast Middle. And it's because of your support and belief in our refugee kids and immigrant kids and belief in our program that now we get to serve kids for mental health services and enrollment and support groups and Afghan girl support groups and all these amazing things. So thank you for the award. And I'll give it to everybody at JVS that deserves it. So thank you very much.
All right, that's an excellent way to get the superintendent's report started. I want to the families who are here tonight, just say thank you all for coming, and thank you all for continuing to work with the school district. Your children were well rewarded tonight for their hard work, and we know that that's not possible without your support. To our 3 administrators who have been recognized today, you all know where you stand with me, and our 2 pre-K centers. You all did provide the blueprint for how we would help enter into schools across the district, because you all basically were the beta test sites for us during that first year of COVID. So I want to thank you all for your work, and also JVS for their support. And so we will move on now to item number 2, which is the workshop presentation. We have our academic year wrap-up, and for this presentation, I'll bring David Rand up to the podium.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Bedell. Good evening, Board Chair Hogan, board members, Dr. Bedell, community. This evening, we have a presentation reporting on Board Policy 1.1, which is our academic year wrap-up. And I am David Rand, Executive Director of Research and Accountability, and I'm partnering with Dr. Philip Jones, Interim Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, to give this report. So Board Policy 1.1 is actually titled High Achieving Critical Thinkers. Not going to read the paragraph to you. I'm sure everybody can read on their own. But basically what we are providing this evening is looking at some assessment data from this spring and this last school year. So really the way that we evaluate a big piece of our academic achievement is by looking at our year-end assessments. Our year-end assessments consist of both the state assessment, which is the grade level assessment for grades 3 through 8, as well as our end of course exams for high school, as well as our iReady testing that we give 3 times a year. iReady is a diagnostic assessment. We give that assessment in fall, winter, and spring to students in grades K through 8. Kindergartners don't test in the fall. So we look at their data from winter to spring. In looking at our data, some of the important things that iReady gives us is looking at student growth across the school year. So comparing a student where they started the school year to where they ended in spring. And the way that we do that is by looking at two different types of goals that students get based on their fall iReady score. We have our typical growth score, which basically says, okay, say your score on iReady in fall was a 300. We're going to compare you against all other students historically that had a score of 300 in the fall. And based on that norm group, how did you perform relative to all those other students? And another way to look at it is basically making a year progress in a year of instruction. The other piece is stretch growth, which actually is looking at more than 1 year of growth. Because when you think about our students that are below grade level, if they just make their typical growth, that's not going to get them caught back up to grade level. And so that's why it's important to have that stretch growth as well. Another thing that we use iReady for is for our Senate Bill 319 students to assess whether or not they're close enough to grade level to come off of that list. In looking at history and previous context, as you might remember, in spring of 2020, we did not administer the state assessment due to the pandemic. In spring of last year, we did administer the state assessment, but they allowed us to not have to test as many students. Traditionally, you are allowed to not test 5% of your students, which means you have to have a 95% participation rate. So after that 85% participation rate in spring of 21, we're back to 95%. Another thing to keep in mind is that the fall and winter assessments for iReady in school year 2021 were taken at home, whereas all of the ones from this year were in person. So we do not have our state assessment results back yet, but we do have our participation rates. Again, it's incredibly important that we hit 95% in order to qualify for points on the state annual performance report. And you can see our percentages here. We did a really good job of testing. Got 99% of students tested in math and 98.6% of students tested in science. That 96.5 you see in ELA is actually higher than that because that doesn't account for our English language learners that have been in the country for 12 months or less. Those students are actually exempt from taking the ELA assessment and will get pulled out of that data when the state runs it. Other thing I really wanted to give a shout out to KCVA. They did a really good job of getting their students in to test in person. Without those efforts, it would have been really hard for us to hit that 95% with the number of kids that we have in that program. This slide right here is providing some data that looks at fall to spring by grade level and by student group. You will see the total number of students that tested, and that's the total number that had both a fall and a spring score. If a student didn't have both a pre and a post, then they're not included in this data. For both reading and math, you'll see the first column, that's the percentage of students that met their typical growth target. The next column is the percentage of students that hit their stretch growth target. And then the last column is telling you the number of students that actually advanced a tier. And some of the data that Dr. Jones will be sharing, we look at students in tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1 being the highest and on or above grade level, and tier 3 being 2 or more years below grade level. And so if you move from a 3 to a 2, or a 2 to a 1, or a 3 to a 1, you're considered to have advanced a tier. And so you will see that for both reading and math. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Phillip Jones to step you through some more historical trend data, as well as some information around next steps.
Good evening, Board Chair Hogan, board members. I'm Dr. Phil Jones from the Department of Curriculum and Instruction. So the last time I was here, we had our fall data and our winter data for iReady in the area of reading and in math. So now that we're in the spring, we have that spring data. I want to kind of show the movement of our students between the fall and spring. So as you can see, this is our 3-year trend. And a couple of things that I want to point out is, first of all, if you notice, looking at where we started, in both, or in all 3 years, you can see that we ended our school year with having more students being on or above grade level than we began. That's at Tier 1. We also decreased the number of students that were in our Tier 3. Those would be our students who are 2 or more grade levels below where they should be. One of the things that I definitely want to point out is, if you look at that spring school year 2019, that was the last school year that we had before the COVID pandemic and before we were trying to bring teachers and students back into the building. If you compare that to this year, the spring of 2022, you see that despite having students being out due to, one, the pandemic, but also coming back and being out because of sickness and things of that nature related to the various variants and teachers, we were able to maintain the growth that we were seeing and the success that we were having prior to the pandemic. If we move to math, we see similar results in that if we compare fall to spring, again, in both cases, or in all 3 cases, what we were doing is increasing the number of our Tier 1 students, those being on or above grade level, decreasing the number of students that are in our Tier 3, 2 or more years behind. Now, as we all know, math was hit a little bit harder than reading nationally, and especially in the state of Missouri. So, if we compare the spring of 2021 to the spring of 2022, you can see that although you can definitely see that dip in the number of students that are in our Tier 1 and a slight increase in the number of students that are in Tier 3, we're moving in the right direction, going back to where we were pre-pandemic as it relates to math. Now, as we really zoom into this school year, comparing fall, winter, and spring, looking at the progression, both in reading and in math, one of the things that I want to bring out, first of all, in reading, is that if you look at our Tier 1 students, we were able to more than double the number of students in Tier 1 and bring down the number of students that were in Tier 3 by more than 20%. But if we compare that reading to math, you see that math had a greater growth than we had even in reading, with our Tier 1 increasing by more than 3 times. So 3 times the number of students at the beginning of the school year were in Tier 1 compared to what we were able to achieve at the end of the school year. And then if we look at Tier 3, bringing down that number of students that were 2 or more grade levels behind, we decreased that number by 25%, which really goes to that part of the previous slide that Mr. Rand showed, where we were talking about advancing those students into that next tier, moving from Tier 3 to 2, and then moving students from Tier 2 to Tier 1. As we talk about our Senate Bill 319 students, again, the last time I was here in February, we had our fall data and our winter data. That would be in blue and orange. Now we have our spring data. And as you can see, again, we are decreasing the number of students that were 2 or more grade levels behind and increasing the number of students that were just a few points of getting into that 1 year below band, and those students that made it into the 1 year or on grade level band. Now, one of the things I do want to say is, if you're doing any quick math, you'll notice that the number of students that we have in that green, which represents spring, is greater than what we had in the fall. And that's because, each year we get an influx of students. And with some of those students, we're going to get students that are in that Senate Bill 319 designation. But despite having those students come in the middle of the year, we were still able to provide all of our students with the state mandated 30 hours of tutoring. Now, we would love to be able to have that green be 100%, but we have to take in consideration that this year, despite having given those students that 30 hours of tutoring, we still had some issues with students not being able to stay after school due to them being out because of COVID, the teachers being out because of COVID, and even transportation issues just with the families of having their students being able to stay consecutive days after school. We find that if a student, we saw them, let's say week 1, and then we're not able to see them for a couple of days or even into week 2, it kind of makes that learning disjointed. And so we have some ways of being able to heal that process in the future. So future plannings. So the first 2 bullets, I have to tip my hat to David's department, because they were very good at looking at how can we better utilize not only our testing platforms, but also the testing windows. So one of the things that his department has done is really look at what assessments are needed, when should they be given, and how they should be given. In addition to that, he was able to determine that those testing windows that we have, we could more efficiently have our students be tested so that our windows don't have to be as large, meaning more instructional days in the school year. In addition to what his department has done, when we look at iReady, when we first brought iReady on board, one of the things that we were able to do in that onboarding or purchasing that particular platform, we were able to get this instructional toolkit for our reading and our writing. And we found that that toolkit was one of the things that helped us keep our numbers, keep the learning where it needs to be in reading. Well, taking some of the ESSER money that was allocated toward us and diverting it specifically to instructional practices, we're able now to purchase that same type of instructional toolkit for math. In hopes of thinking that that would be able to help us do the exact same thing for math and increase some of the growth that we are currently seeing with math right now. So some of the successes, as David said, for our students trying to or being able to achieve that typical growth or that stretch growth, about 7,600 of our students were able to either reach that for reading, reach that for math, and we're talking about typical growth or stretch growth, as well as having some students that are in that group that actually reach that level for both reading and math. Again, when we look at that participation goal for MAP, last year that goal was 85% set by the state. The threshold this year was 95%. We were able to meet and exceed that 95% as far as participation by our students taking MAP. For EOC, that threshold was 90%, and again, we were able to meet and exceed that. And then, as I said before, if we look at our pre-pandemic iReady reading numbers, even though that we had some of the disruption due to teachers being out, students being out, we were still able to maintain where we were prior to the COVID pandemic. Barriers. With all of this, there are going to be some things that we have to get over, around, and through. And one of the things about the MAP test is getting back that data. This is the time when we take the data that we've received from this year and make some instructional changes, some shifts. And with the data that we get from MAP, it's very important to be able to understand what type of questions, what are the DOK levels that the state is looking at, just to make sure that that is represented in our classrooms. That process is something that we have to rely on the state to give us. So that's one of the things that is going to kind of keep us from making as many shifts as we would like to right now. Next, this accountability system. And again, I have to tip my hat to David's department. One of the things that they were able to do is really bring about a process by which we could have vendors help us see which systems are working and why. We always talk about these key performance indicators, and having someone to help us not only collect that data, but then take that data to give us a story or allow us to be able to see a trend is so important. And his team has led that, and we've started that process of getting the data, but it will take a little time for us to process that and come out with where we're going to be with that. And then, as I said before, looking at those before and after school opportunities for our students. Although we're able to do what the state has said as far as the mandate of 30 hours, we are looking at ways of being able to alleviate some of the stress that families may find of having their students be there before school and after school by providing during the day tutoring in addition to what students are able to get before and after school, just in case they're not able to stay or there's some disruption with their tutor because of COVID issues and things of that nature. So action items. And again, this whole section has been about assessment and instruction. So when we look at assessment, as I said, David's department has finalized that assessment calendar, making sure that we do the right tests with the right students at the right time. You know, in the same vein of that, you know, right student, right strategy, right standard kind of model. In addition to that, making sure that schools know how to use these windows efficiently so that you do not have to go beyond them and take instructional days up to allow students to make up tests that they missed for whatever reason. And then, as I said, you know, having those targeted data points that that vendor will help us figure out, you know, yes, this is a good tool for what we're trying to get. As far as the desegregation of map data, that's going to be something that they're going to be constantly working on. And again, we're talking about, you know, the percentages of students by grade level, you know, the type of test questions that we have, the DOK levels, as well as how our students performed at the school level, grade level, district level, so forth and so on. Now, the assessment goals, these are very important because one of the things that his department realizes, sometimes you have to tell not only the test takers, but the test givers why a particular test is being given and what kind of information you want to glean from that. So they have put that together to make sure that that is clear.
Dr. Jones, if you can, you have DOK in here, can you kind of break that down? What is DOK
yes.
so people know?
Yes, so DOK stands for it's the depth of knowledge. And when we talk about depth of knowledge, what we're really saying is what type of skill do you need to be able to understand some information? Recall, is it just memory? Is it processing? Things of that nature. So what you find is that with our state tests, it's not a lot of recall. It's not memorization. You have to be able to process information. And so that's why that's so important for us. I'm sorry. Now, as I said, we have the assessment side, and now if we look at the instructional side, it's, you know, those three focuses that we've talked about before: literacy, mathematics, and culturally responsive practices. You know, with our literacy, you know, we're really looking at, you know, moving forward with our reading campaign and using a lot of those family liaisons to make sure that family members know what that means for us and how to be part of this reading campaign. Having this district-wide reading strategy that also looks at how reading goes across content areas. That's really called disciplinary literacy, and what we're really talking about there is how reading in a literature class is different than how things look in math, how things look in science, how things look in social studies as far as the reading and writing of the material. And then girding all of that up and supporting it with our reading endorsements that have started, but will continue throughout the next couple of years. On the math side, again, looking at numeracy, making sure that we have that foundation for our K-12 group of students, as well as making sure that our teachers are very knowledgeable about the mathematical practice for those upper grade levels. And again, similar to literacy, girding that up and supporting that with the math endorsement for our teachers that will start this year, the school year coming up, and then continue throughout the next couple of years. With the culturally responsive practices, the main thing that we'll be doing next year is having our curriculum audited, and it'll start this summer. Now, I have to tip my hat to Dr. Davis's department because he led that RFP on bringing that vendor on board. And although I can't really speak to, you know, the vendors or about what was said, I do want to, you know, assure you that some of the things that we're looking at, first of all, is, you know, what culturally responsive practices are in our current curriculum. And that is those practices that were not only put there by coordinators, but put there by teachers. One of the things that we did this spring was to have teachers come in and help us with making updates to our curriculum. And that's something that we're going to continue moving forward. I think that it is not only a best practice, but it really helps us to have a more robust, a more a curriculum that really meets the needs not only of our teachers, but mainly our students and our families. The other thing is not only looking at what goes in, but what should be coming out. So what are the outputs that we expect to get from our students? So having those two identified, the other thing that, you know, we definitely want to come out of this audit is the intention. So although we may have these culturally responsive practices in our curriculum, what does that mean as far as the implementation? Are we getting the intended use of those resources and of those practices? And then again, on the side of students, are we getting the intended outcome from the students if they are exposed to these practices? And so those are some of the areas that, from the instructional side, we're moving forward in school year 2023. So with that, if there are any questions, I will take them now.
Thank you, Dr. Phil. Mr. Abarca?
Thanks. This is awesome. Kudos on the work for the entire team. So I think if I can go back to slide 20, I think,
Okay, let's.
and this might be a Mr. Rand question here. Just trying to understand how ELL students fall within this. Can you help break that down?
Yes, so our ELL students are going to be listed as LEP, the second line from the bottom.
Okay.
So we had about 2,000 ELL students test in both reading and math. And if you look, basically, LEP students, ELL students met their growth goals at basically the same rate as district average, a little below in terms of meeting stretch growth in reading, and pretty much right with the district average in advancing a tier. If you look at math, ELL students actually met their growth targets at a greater rate than the district as a whole, as well as slightly greater in meeting the stretch goals, and also outperformed the district totals as a whole in advancing a tier. So what's important to keep in mind about our ELL students is they have to be officially identified in receiving services. And so we also have students that were once English language learners that progressed out of that classification. So you're not always going to be an ELL student. There are certain criteria in terms of how you perform on a language proficiency exam, along with some other criteria that you use to exit a student from ELL status. And then basically what we do is we monitor that student for up to 3 years to ensure that the student's still progressing language-wise and doesn't need ELL services.
So along the same lines here, where's our greatest opportunity and subgroup for growth?
I mean, it's all over the place. I think among our Black students, there's definitely a lot of opportunity there. I mean, really, it's with all of our students. We have, if you look at, that tier data from fall and even from spring, where, yes, we're seeing some really good growth, but still, not having 40% of kids on grade level is definitely a problem. So I would say among basically all students, we have a lot of opportunity. When we've looked at how our students perform against the state, although Black students don't have as high as proficiency rates, our students here are a lot closer to the state average than our Hispanic students are to the Hispanic state average. But a lot of that ELL comes into play there too, in terms of the actual number of ELL students we have that make up our Hispanic population versus the ELL makeup of the state population.
2 comments, and I want to give it back. You mentioned the incentives at the end and the reading programs, and I recall there's still some money in the budget from this year that needs to be looked at, and probably future dollars there in the expenditures line. So there you go.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Wolsey?
Don't leave, Mr. Rand. It's also slide 20. I just really want to understand this better, and you explaining, it's obvious now that the color coding is related to the district total, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so now I've got that part. The part I wanted to just kind of make sure, maybe you could help me understand by I was looking at 7th and 8th grade, which are our typical middle school folks. So if I'm reading in the reading section here I gotta get my little glasses out. So, meeting growth for reading at 8th grade, at roughly 54%, so above. The stretch is about 24. So then they got a red because they are under the advancing a tier, but yet, you know, they're doing better in meeting growth in the stretch. So just, I'm trying to understand why the difference there, if you could help me.
Absolutely. And what you'll also notice is that you're seeing red in the early grade levels in terms of the students that are meeting their
Yes.
growth, but you're seeing green
On the
in
advance.
advancing of tiers. And basically what it is tier 2 is 1 year below grade level, and tier 3 is more like 2 or more years below grade level. And so at the lower grades, there's only so far you can fall behind in kindergarten and first grade, and it's a lot easier to get out of that tier 3. However, when you start to get to middle school, that's when we're having our students that are 3-4 years below grade level, and it's going to take a lot more growth in order to get out of that particular tier.
Thank you, that was very helpful. I mean, I'm assuming that is, we use this data then to help us come up with strategies to address those massive deficits. Okay.
Ms. Buckner?
Hi. I know you've probably told me this 1,000 times, but could you repeat the difference between the typical growth and the stretch growth?
Yeah, no, and it's not the easiest thing to understand, so no, it's a perfectly great question. Your typical growth is basically a year of growth and a year of instruction. And so if you think, I'll use kind of a different analogy with a different type of score. So if you're at the 30th percentile, you're compared against all other kids that started at the 30th percentile. But if you just make typical growth, you're probably still at the 30th percentile. You haven't moved up or gained on grade level. Stretch growth is looking at more like a year and a half, 2 years of growth, depending on where you start. And that stretch growth is when you're making more than 1 year of progress and 1 year of instruction. And obviously, if you're a year or more below grade level, you're never going to catch up unless you actually make more than 1 year of progress and a year of academic instruction.
Thank you. And is this compared across the district or across the state?
It's a national comparison.
A national comparison.
Yes, so all of our students during each testing window are compared against a norm group. And so I don't remember the last time iReady did their norming, but basically they take all the scores from all the districts that take it across the country, eliminate the ones that are outliers, and use that as the comparison group. And so you might have 20,000 third grade fall reading scores, so that when your one student in that grade level takes that fall test, they're compared to the group of 20,000 to see, based on that, where did they fall.
Thank you for that. And I'll probably ask you some more.
Please do. That's a question I can answer, so I always like those.
And I wanted to ask, just go on that too, because one of the reasons why we moved to iReady was because it not only gave us norm reference data, it also gave us criterion reference data. There's an alignment to this data to the MAP assessment. So it makes it easy for us to determine a correlation. When those kids' data comes in, it gives us this ideal within the standard deviation of how we think we would fall generally within that plus or minus 3 percentage points, and it's kind of falling like that in most cases, maybe a 5% variance or something in most cases, right?
Yeah, the last one we looked at that was 19, I want to say it was less than 2 points off in both subjects, which is, it's very highly correlated and really gives us a good idea of where our students are. And I'm glad Dr. Bedell mentioned that, because, just knowing where a student is just the start, right? Then you can kind of go one level deep and say, kind of by content cluster. So in math, geometric skills, number sense, how are students performing in each of those areas to see, is there one particular area that a teacher could work with a small group of students on in order to address that particular content area. And then the next level from that is actually looking at the individual standards, as Dr. Jones was referencing, so under each of those content clusters, there's a whole list of state standards that students are measured on, and that links perfectly with our proficiency scales. And so when you hear us talking about that proficiency scale work, the great work that their curriculum department is doing, that's the idea, is that you're able to drill down to the standard, know how kids are performing on the standard, and then be able to reference that proficiency scale to say, okay, in order to hit that next level, to go from a 1 to a 2 or a 2 to a 3, what are those particular skills that a student needs to do? And as Dr. Jones mentioned, a big piece of that is what is the item type, right? For example, in order to, say, be at a level 2, you might need to be able to infer from explicit details, like something that's actually written out in a passage that you make an inference from. But to be at a level 3, you might have to infer from implicit details. And so that kind of verb or adjective, those are the real keys in helping teachers understand that's how you move from a certain level to the next level.
I have 2 more questions.
Yeah.
So in the vein of culturally responsive teaching, I know that the way that some of these questions are worded on the MAP assessment come into play. And so what has been our response to our students understanding? So, because sometimes it's not necessarily the content, but the way that it's.
Yeah, no, that's such a huge thing with a lot of our students as well as our ELL students, right? Like, and this is stuff that we talked about at our sit, and Principal Hinojosa, was like, there's a passage and they're talking about a porcupine. Like, a lot of our kids, like, I don't know what a porcupine is, right? And so as a district, what we try to do is go with companies and test vendors that do look at their assessments through a culturally responsive lens. So for instance, in discussions with both Dr. Jones and Dr. Davis, we've looked at SAT, because SAT promotes that they have actually done that analysis of their test content through an equity lens. And so we have to say, okay, is this going to be a more fair assessment for our students, even though basically nobody gives it in the state of Missouri? And so those are the types of things that we try to look at. Also, when we're building our district interim assessments, we make sure to really vet those passages to ensure that those types of language or stories that may not apply, like, a story about a family going to a beach where some of the questions assume you've been to a beach. Things like that are what we look at to try to ensure that we're giving our kids the most fair assessment possible, because it's just a fact. There is definitely bias in these assessments against students of color and students of lower socioeconomic status.
It's just a fabulous question, and I was over here like, but I'm going to pounce on this one because you're absolutely right. We were very intentional in our sit to be very explicit about how the assessments we feel insert a level of biases that I think is very unfair. And I told the commissioner that 51 or 52% of black kids in the state of Missouri living in below basic, that's an indictment on the state. There's no way that all of these kids are performing that poorly when you think about like some of the question stems, and Hinojosa did a great job of kind of explaining that to them with how he actually went in and really showed the state, and the commissioner was here. She took down notes. I think it's something that I told them. It does require a deeper inspection into what these assessments are saying, and we're not making excuses. It's just a reality when you look at the question stems and how they're written, that it does insert a level of biasy. But I find it very hard to believe that 52% of black kids in this whole state are below basic. And then if you go and you add maybe the other 30% that might be living in basic, you're talking about well over 80% of your kids in the state of Missouri that are either basic or below basic that are black. Now, I also said to her that because of how these assessments have been designed, that we haven't had over 48% of kids in the aggregate to pass any of them, right? We haven't cracked 48% on these new assessments in any area across the state. So kids overall across the state of Missouri are not faring well on these new assessments at all. So so it's a great question. It is something that we are pushing with the commissioner, and I think it's not just us, it's other superintendents that are pushing this too.
One thing I do want to add, the state has reached out to us, and we have more representation now on those committees that help to write some of these questions and help vet some of these questions than we had in the past. So we do have a seat at the table, and we are in the process of catching some of these things ahead of time and being part of the conversation of how to make these questions and how to make these assessments more inclusive. So I have to say that, the state is working with us to help us do this.
That's great news. Thank you. Okay, so my last question. Could you just kind of narrate the data for sixth grade, like what's happening there?
Yeah, so sixth grade, and I brought this up when we were initially looking at it. So one important thing is you never want to draw conclusions or make decisions off of one data point. And so in looking at the sixth grade, we need to dig into that, because it's possible that just the way the sixth grade test is kind of structured statistically and how they scale it, it might be easier to do a little better. So the grade 1 test is not necessarily the same difficulty level or the exact same scale as the grade 6 test. But honestly, I don't have an answer for that right now. We just need to dig into the data and look at some other data points to see why students are. Because when you see that high number, your next logical conclusion would be, why does that drop so much when they get to 7th grade, right? Because you would think that you would kind of maintain that momentum. And so that's why I'm a little hesitant to say that 6th grade really killed it this year. Just need to look at some additional data. So that's a long way of saying I don't have an answer for that right now.
Could we have that, just a little bit more about what you came up with and for an action item? I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking for, but I would just like to know the story behind it.
I hear exactly what you're asking.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
All right, I think we're going to go to the heavens now. And Ms. Ford, I think you had a question?
Hi, I have a few questions. It's about the map data. When can we anticipate having that from what you understand?
This is a fun question. So there's two pieces to it. So we in the next few weeks, we will have access to the individual student scores. And based off of those individual student scores, we can run basically projections on what we think the official scores will be, but they will not be official and officially released by the state until October or November.
Okay. And then when we get both, so when we look when you said don't make decisions off of just one data point, like how do we utilize both of the assessments together to inform our efforts? So both MAP and iReady together, how are we using them both kind of in partnership?
So it's a little tough just because the MAP results are lagging. Ideally, if we had the MAP right now, we could look at them side by side. And if we're seeing the exact same thing at 6th grade on the state assessment that we're seeing in iReady, then we can be a lot more confident and say, wow, whatever our 6th grade teachers were doing this year is really great. I think that the more relevant data is for our schools to really look at the iReady and then kind of drill down into our interims as well as their classroom formative assessments, because that's really the data triangulation that is going to be the most efficient. If you look at, even though iReady is diagnostic, it's more of a summative type assessment in that it does give you some information relative to standards, but it's more, the purpose is to kind of know where students are. And MAP is also a similar assessment to that. So you would want to mix in different assessment types, and the closer you get to assessments that are given in the classroom, the more valuable that data is going to be. And so we would sit down, and when we get the official results, we'll look at it side by side with iReady. But when we ask our schools and our teachers to triangulate, we're really asking them to kind of dig deeper into that more rich data that you get from more specific formative end of unit short cycle assessments.
And Ms.
Okay.
Ford, because of what we had said earlier, we're talking about, at least back in 2019, there was a 2% variance between how our kids performed on their iReady spring data compared to how they ended up performing on their MAP assessment. So because it is, the correlation is really close, absent of us having map data, in order for us to plan and build out our school improvement plans for the upcoming year, we truly have to depend on this iReady data as our foundation and how we respond and how we design professional development and all of that. And because we do have a high degree of confidence, we feel comfortable that this will keep us on track. But that has been my frustration, Ms. Ford, and that's been for all 6 years. My argument around why we get our data back so late, and you want to get that data back, you would hope to get it back towards the end of May, so that gives you the summer to plan and respond, but unfortunately, this state really lags in that piece.
How do we support students where we don't have assessment data for? Like maybe if we're using iReady, they don't take both of the tests. What do we utilize to support them?
So if you don't have any assessment data, your best bet's probably going to be student work. Looking at what the student is actually producing and then evaluating that work back against our proficiency scales to make a determination of kind of where that student is. And the other piece is with our Illuminate platform, our teachers have the ability to create their own assessments. And so an assessment doesn't have to be 30 questions. You can have 3 to 5 questions on 1 to 2 standards that you might be focusing on to get an idea of where your students are. And so absent that kind of higher level iReady or map data, it would kind of be up to the teacher to look at student work and those shorter cycle formative assessments that, yes, and we also have our interim assessments. Our interim assessments are strictly standards-based in that what we're really wanting to see is what percentage of students are mastering which standards. And so those are all kind of ways that we would look at that.
Okay. My final piece is more of an observation. I would love for us to continue to explore how we are sharing this assessment data with parents and helping them to unpack it. I received my son's iReady data, at the end of the school year. I think it was the last week. It came home in his backpack, but there really wasn't, any kind of follow up as to what it was that I was reading. And I like to believe I'm somewhat informed. And so it just makes me think of parents in other scenarios. So I think there continues to be opportunity there, maybe using the liaisons. I'm not sure, but something.
Yeah, no, I think there is a lot of opportunity, and that is a great point. And I think what that really speaks to is ensuring that our teachers are comfortable with explaining that data. So I know many a time I've gone to my daughter's parent-teacher conferences, both when she's a foreign language as well as at Lincoln, and they might hand you some test scores from like 2 months ago and not really explain what's on there. It's because we want our families to know where their kids are, but if that teacher isn't super comfortable with understanding exactly what those results say, they're really not going to be able to translate that for our families, because that is always a challenge, is some of these assessments and what they're measuring, it's kind of technical stuff, and then just being able to explain that in plain language so that all of our families can understand exactly what they're looking at. Yeah, I definitely agree there's opportunity there.
Ms. Buckner?
So this literacy data is of urgency to me, and to everyone, I'm sure. And so I'm thinking about the academic vision that Dr. Collier rolled out, and we were talking about RTI specifically. And I think Dr. Bedell sent you an email asking for some very specific data on how our schools that are doing RTI with fidelity, how those schools are faring out. And so, because I know that I heard that this was going to be a push for Blueprint 2030. And so I would like to see that data, how those schools are doing by grade level. So if we could put that as an action step. And then also, we talk a lot about, and I'm seeing a lot of data with K through 12, but I haven't really heard us unpack the literacy component with pre-K. We have a number of pre-K sites, And I have a son that's in pre-K, and I don't know if this is specific to Montessori because he's at Holiday, but just understanding his progress with oral language or his progress towards literacy, I think is really important. And so, do we have any data that shows like how our pre-K kids are doing? Because it matters.
Yes.
What's happening at the pre-K level, and it has implications for what shows up later on.
Yeah, I can just picturing our early childhood people jumping up and down, so excited right now at that question. Yes, we definitely do have some early childhood data, in addition to kindergarten readiness data that I think would both be good to share with the board, and I'm sure Julia would absolutely love to do that. Okay.
Ms. Cortez.
So I do have questions, but I think I'm gonna send them to you for follow-up. So a little easier than trying to get my brain.
Fair enough. One quick point to round out this particular section, and then one question. So as we're talking about, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. As we're talking about MAP and getting the results back timely, I feel like this has been a theme certainly for my entire time on the board. So for the last 3 years. And I wonder, Dr. Bedell, with your newfound relationship with Senator O'Laughlin and her being, no, I'm being serious, mostly. I'm just curious, like, is there a legislative fix here, right? We're in a state with the legislature who doesn't mind sort of encroaching around on the boundaries of other agencies within the state. And I feel like it's falling on deaf ears, right? We need this data in as close to real time as possible to inform us to go make decisions quickly, not a year after the data comes in. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity to go work with her to get a legislative fix to force that data in our hands a lot faster than we're getting it today.
The answer to that question is yes, sir.
Well, and what I can also.
Well, I think we got to move down that path. Like it's crazy that we have to wait so long for data on our kids when we're trying to educate them.
Yes.
Right, and get them on course.
Yeah, and when I was over in KCK, we had this same conversation with the Department of Ed there. And, we were saying, we need this data quicker and we need the test to be, shorter. And they were like, well, how are we going to give you all this great curricular information without this long test? And I'm like, your curricular information coming in October from the previous April isn't helpful either. And so I think there's definitely conversations that could be had both with DESE as well as potential legislation that could help steer us in that direction.
The final question would be, so on the successes, slide 26, I think it's great that we're back to pre-pandemic levels with reading. But sort of to Ms. Buckner's point, I'm curious what we're doing or what the plan is in the upcoming school year to really accelerate growth in reading.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we did see is especially looking at some of our Senate Bill 319 students, those that had the interventionists, they were able to grow far more than those that did not. So we were able to proactively bring in more of those reading interventionists this year. Last year was hard to find human capital. We were able to capitalize on being able to do that this year. The other thing is looking at some of those grade levels, before you get to third and fourth grade, and honing or bringing up a lot of those foundational reading skills. And that's kind of like where the reading endorsement comes in. Because once you gear up or build up those foundational skills, now when you start reading for comprehension and reading for knowledge, you don't have that difficulty to get over decoding as our students sometimes have when they come to us now. So we were specifically looking at building that foundation, widening that band, and using those individuals, those interventionists, to really bring our students along faster and quicker.
I would just add, I wanted to make sure we highlight the reading interventionists. That's part of the reason why we increased our numbers of interventionists, making sure that some schools will have more than one, so that we have that intense support focused on literacy. But also we're looking at a focus on academic vocabulary and language. So when we talk about some of the bias that we see in assessments, Oftentimes our students don't recognize certain terms. It doesn't mean they don't understand a concept, but they may not understand certain terms. And so we want to make sure that we're focusing in on academic language. And then also the other piece, one more piece I was thinking. Reading intervention is, the district-wide literacy strategy. So a part of what we want to do is to make sure that teachers are proficient and strong in the use of certain literacy strategies. And so what we want to do is have a district-wide literacy strategy, one or two that we're focusing on for the year, so that, number one, we can provide adequate professional development on that, and then also so our teams can go in and to monitor the implementation of those strategies. How are teachers doing this? How are students responding? And be able to provide that feedback to them. And then schools can also utilize other strategies, but we want to make sure that we have that district-wide focus so that we have levels of proficiency around how reading instruction is even delivered to our students.
Yeah, Ms. Cortez.
So I actually want to follow up on Dr. Collier's comments to maybe present a challenge, which I would encourage you to think one dimension beyond that in your literacy strategy, because if we don't create the communication channel and the tool to empower the caring adult in the life of our kids who can understand, it doesn't have to be a deep academic exercise. It could be, these are two things that you could work on with your student that will help them progress and allow us to build off that platform. But I think in the absence of that, we're either giving people too much or too little. And so I think to create that third dimension to that literacy strategy, we got to think about how are we empowering the adults around our kids who aren't teachers to be their teachers.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's a part of the reading campaign that we're looking at for next year, how we communicate with our families, how we help empower our parents to be able to help their students as readers. So that is something that you will see, and then really utilizing those parent liaisons that we have in the building, in every building next school year, to assist with some of that as well.
I mean, I think I would really encourage us to think about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to give people something to work with. We're not expecting them to be everything for their student reader.
Right.
But if our teachers are too lost in the data to be able to tell somebody, hey, Daniel needs to work on these two things, and if he does that, then we can carry the ball. I mean, I see that happen. I mean, my sister, as an example, she's an early childhood educator and administrator, and the kids she struggles with the most, those are the, just giving a parent one tool and unlock, that piece. I think we're missing an opportunity if we don't do that.
Mr. Abarca, final question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, and along some of those same lines, if I'm a parent watching this, how do I make effective choices come enrollment? What entity exists that helps compare some of this data to other institutions and choices out there? And how are we leveraging it to show parents that we are obviously making gains in certain areas and that they should send their kids here?
So that is a very good question. This last year was a bit tough just because with the year not being sure how reliable all of that data is, but we did do analysis of KCPS versus the 20 charter schools. And what we found is that depending on the subject, there was only one or two charter schools that did a better job than we did at alleviating learning loss. And what this enabled us to do is go from the bottom half when compared to charter schools to now we're in the top half. And so I think that you can get on the state website. It's not the easiest to find. And so I think that's probably an opportunity for us to make sure we're putting out that message, because we really are making large gains on the charter schools. We did not drop in ELA, and there were charter schools that dropped like 100 MAP performance index points. And so, we are making definite gains on charters, and we're now outperforming more charters than are outperforming us. Not yet.
All right, Dr. Jones.
Just a quick observation. I know that there are some folks at the city level we've compiled just a grouping of organizations that serve kids over the summer. And so I, have mentioned this before, but I think it would be a great opportunity as you look across all of your data and you see key things that stand out to you. For instance, my kid was told earlier in the school year, he's reading, but he needs to practice comprehension more. As you look across all of your data and certain things like that stand out to you across the district, it'd be great to share that with some of the partners who are dealing with our kids this summer. I know we have our own program, but some kids are at the Y, they're at, my kids at another camp, that if they had just a little tiny summary of, hey, if you would help the district by pushing these concepts in your work, I think they would love to do that. So
Okay.
just saying, putting that out there.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate
All
it.
right, thank you.
Dr. Bedell.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. And then we just have a quick update. We're into just completed day 3 of summer school and just wanted to update the board on how that's going so far. And Dr. Jackson will present that report.
Thank you for the preference of a quick update, because it will be quick. I want to appreciate my colleagues taking all the tough questions tonight. So we'll get our 3-day overview of the summer school program. I do want to begin with a thank you, a big thank you to a couple of people who've kind of led this, coordinated this effort for us for this summer, and that's Lori Peters and Jessica Power. They've been a big lift to making sure that this is organized and making the work what it is. But also want to appreciate the many departments within the KCPS system. They've been very collaborative, very cooperative, and certainly communicative around organizing and coordinating the efforts through this summer academy process. And so through that, we began with some directives from our cabinet, from our board, around how we're going to do this, and began this conversation back in October. And we brought in a team of folks, again, from every department in our system, to start looking at our enrollment process, our technology needs, our transportation needs, our curriculum processes, in order to refine them, to get them where we need them to be for a smooth rollout to summer, the 18 days we get for summer school. So I want to say thank you to that team as well. We had a goal of about 4,000 students to enroll in our summer school program. When we began on June 6, we had 4,300 students enrolled in our summer school program. Now our biggest challenge is getting those students in the seats. And so to date, as of today, we've gotten about 3,100 of those students physically with us. And then we have another 300 or so who are with our partners and in that program. So a sum total of about 3,400 of our students have shown up in the first 3 days of summer school. And we are working to get that other 900 of our students in the seats and in the spaces as we work out some systems and some processes in order to get them and encourage them. Making phone calls, doing what we can to put out the emails, also those text messages in order to encourage. So if you are a family that signed up for summer school and you're listening, come join us. There's still time to be involved with us this summer for Summer Academy. And in order to encourage attendance, we did have an incentive program, and that incentive for our students is a $100 gift card. If you're here 17 of the 18 days, we're giving you some incentive there, but we're also incentivizing our teaching staff, because we know that student attendance as well as teacher attendance is important in order for these 18 days to be impactful as we continue to accelerate learning from this COVID era that we've been in over the last couple of years. So our teachers are getting a $1,000 incentive for having perfect attendance. So those are individuals who are directly impacting student learning, as well as our paraprofessionals in the classroom will get a $500 incentive for their perfect attendance. And our students, through the work of our teachers and our paraprofessionals and the other supports that are in place, are engaging in some enrichment activities, some remediation activities, but also credit recovery and credit attainment are provided for our students. And then they're learning in the classrooms through some learning experiences there, but also doing some online learning through credit recovery, project-based learning, service learning, and doing some select field trips. So trying to make this summer academy an experience for our students where it's not just sit and get, but they also get a chance to have an enriched experience as well. So that's our quick summer school update.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Thank you for the quickness. I'm not sure that you'll be able to answer this question. It may point to why we have a delta between the 4,300 and 3,400. I know in years past, we've had issues with our Tyler, but now is Infinite Campus and enrollment and rollover. I do not expect you to answer this, but it may be in the Friday update, some maybe between you and IT. I'd just like to know how smooth that part was. And is it part of the reason there may be a delta there? Is perhaps people who thought they did sign up, like something didn't roll or did roll, and just a little bit of, I'd just like to know definitively, did we think that process was smooth? And really, part of the reason I'm asking is it's kind of the precursor to the fall.
Sure.
And
I can speak to some of that. We've not had major issues with Infinite Campus when it comes to this rollover. We've done a pretty good job of enrolling students directly into Infinite Campus, so they've been enrolled in our system. Some of that 900 is the result of about 1,200 students who enrolled after our May 2nd. We enrolled.
Okay, and
we
we
enrolled
said
them.
no after.
Correct. We enrolled them, our ELL students, some of our special ed students, and then you have some students at our high school level who didn't know they needed credit recovery to the last minute. And so we allowed those students to enroll. Well, that impacts transportation. And so those students, until probably tomorrow, won't have a transportation kind of roll out for them. And so we anticipate that number to go up tomorrow because of transportation needs being met. But again, that was some of our self-inflicted trying to support students as much as we can, get them enrolled as they may be new to our system, and also those students who, again, I failed English 9, second semester, I need to get into summer school, and we provide that opportunity for them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Buckner?
So we only have 3,400, I don't say only.
Sure.
We have 3,400 students enrolled. What's the barrier, the biggest barrier to our kids getting into summer school, do you think?
Getting in, I don't know that we are proud of our 4,300 that actually enrolled. We're trying to get the other 900. I don't know that there were barriers to enrollment. It's just choices families are making around whether or not they want to do or not do summer school. Pretty easy, seamless process for us when it comes to enrolling. It was a simple Google form, fill it out, that kind of thing. But there may be families who are saying, I don't necessarily want to be involved in the summer work.
I meant not getting in, but getting to summer school. I don't know, are we providing transportation
We are, yes.
and all that?
Yep.
Okay.
And so that's why we had a hard deadline of May 2nd, so that we can get all those pieces ironed out. And again, we had about 1,200 after that we're still working out the transportation piece, but it's on its way to being resolved.
And last year I asked for some survey data from our teachers.
Yep.
And I don't think I ever saw that. So we just make sure that we have some survey data for our teachers this year?
Most certainly. It is calendared. Again, we did a lot of lessons learned from last summer. We don't stop. We don't jump in here just freeing of all the historical knowledge we have. That survey data is calendared for us, and so we'll get both survey data from our teachers, our students, and certainly our families along that journey, and we'll be able to have a more robust report and when we come back in August, September, when we do a final report of summer school.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Abarca?
Thanks for the fast report. Two questions. One is, can you help me understand the difference between what a para is doing and what a traditional teacher is doing during summer school to create the separation of incentives?
Yes, a paraprofessional, much like during the regular school year, is really there to support that teacher. They may pull a small group at the direction of the teacher in order to support those students, but the teacher is doing the planning. The teacher is creating the groups. The teacher is doing the instruction, tier 1 instruction, and using the paraprofessional to really support some of that small group work that happens. And so their role there really is supportive, and not necessarily when it comes to the planning and things of that nature.
Thank you. The other is, and I think we talked about this during exec, it's never too early to plan for next summer school.
No.
So what are the barriers that it would take to create a pre-K summer program?
Some of that challenge is much like during the school year is going to be transportation, because we don't transport pre-K. But that's not saying we can't do it. It's just a matter of sitting down with Julia Went and the team in early learning, figure out what that needs to look like. And then the other challenge that may limit where we can host or house pre-K. And then it's not funded.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Okay, so a follow-up question to my other one. It sounds as if we had the new hard deadline, which I like.
Yep.
However, if you're a student that failed a class
Mhm.
after that deadline, and the reason we had the deadline is for the transportation component, am I now in jeopardy if I didn't get myself to school these 3 days of not being able to complete the course that I need for, like, is that a part of the, I'm concerned about those particular students. They kind of get caught in the middle
Mhm.
a little bit.
So there are a couple of things that happen here. One, if you show up and do summer school and you're intentional, because you're working on one course for 6 hours out of the day, should be pretty successful in completing the course if you're diligent in that. The other piece is if a family was proactive and they did not get that particular card around transportation, there are routes that are close. And so we could have easily, and some students have done this. I said, I see a bus stop that's close to me. I'm going to get onto this bus and get to campus. And some of them, because we're doing Central Middle and Central High, I got a call this morning. I have high school students on the middle school bus and walking down to the high school because they wanted to be in the space. And so we're working through that. We don't want that to be a consistent thing, but again, families and students are doing what they need to do in order to get there, and we're going to continue to support them.
Ms. Ford?
I had a question just to better understand maybe if there's any rationale or significance behind the 18 days, and wondering if that is any way a barrier for people who choose other programs that are longer.
Sure. So when we began this planning process, the 18 days was a lot of things. Last year we had a 20-day program or so, 22, 25, and it was difficult to staff. And so we did not have an opportunity because we were doing all we could to get as many teachers as we could. The 18 days is within the month of June. It still gives our faculty the month of July to do what they need to do when it comes to professional development, do what they need to do when it comes to their own personal trips and things of that nature. And we can have a consistent 18 days of faculty. In the past, we've had to split some of those things up because I can only do 3 of the 5 or 6 weeks. And I have no, so inconsistency creates a challenge for the academic progress of our students. So the goal this year was to ensure that we can get enough staff, but also have a quality experience for our students, was to make it the 18 days, which would be a nice solid month of June.
Got it. And then I think there's probably 2 themes that have kind of come up for me from either folks that I've heard from or just my own personal experience. That I think are opportunities for us as well. The communication piece, I think, is one. I know there was initial kind of information sent out, but really not a lot of communication kind of right before the start of summer school. And I know that led to some confusion for folks with transportation and other things. And then another theme that I think has come up is maybe consistency from site to site. Some sites maybe being more welcoming or inviting or just more logistically together on the first couple of days than maybe others. And so I think there's some opportunity there for more consistency across all of the sites. So I can share more specifics about kind of what I've heard, but just wanted to share those high level themes.
Well, thank you for that. And we certainly own the communications piece. We anticipated communicating a lot more frequently. And as we got into the ball rolling and things moving, it did not pan out the way we had planned it. Certainly a note for us to be more diligent around that in the future. Our hope was at least every 2 or 3 weeks you would get something that says, we're looking forward to seeing you. Looking forward to seeing you. You got to keep that on the front of people's minds, certainly noting that. And then I will agree, we spent the first part of the day, the team and I, going to different campuses to kind of see how things were going, saw the inconsistencies, and took some notes on how do we better support those. Because we got to remember, we have assistant principals who are their first shot at opening up a school year for summer. And so how do we better support them, process with them, some notes that we took away from that. So you're exactly right. We did note that as well.
All right, I think we're good. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Awesome, thank
Appreciate the update. All right, Dr. Bedell, I believe that concludes the superintendent's report. So we'll move on to the board of directors report. First, just a quick reminder to board colleagues as well as to the community. We've got our board budget book here in front of us. Please review that. We'll be voting on the budget for the 22-23 fiscal year at our next board meeting. And also for the community, that board budget information is also out on Simbly on our website, and so you have access to this incredibly well put together document with lots of super interesting information. So, no, seriously, it's really interesting stuff. All right, and then we'll move over to a conversation we had last night. So we did interviews for our Board of Equalization representatives that the board gets to appoint to the Jackson County Board of Equalization, which is where folks go for property tax appeals. And so we had interviews with 3 candidates. Everyone who was part of those interviews have scored those candidates based on the criteria that was in the rubric that we used, and we've had a couple of folks move into the top 2 categories. So we've got a primary appointment that we'll make, and then we've got an alternate appointment that we'll make to provide support to the primary. So with that being said, the 2 candidates that we have before us are Mr. Howard Townsend, who has been our representative for the last 2 years, I believe is correct. Is it? Oh, it's 6 years. Okay, 6 years. Apologies to Mr. Townsend. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that long. So that's great. And then we've got Mr. William Lona, who was also part of the process and moved into that alternate role. So is there well, first of all, let me pause. Any questions from the board on that? No? Okay, good. Well, then, is there a motion to appoint Mr. Howard Townsend to represent the Kansas City Public Schools' interest on the Board of Equalization, and to appoint Mr. William Lona as the alternate representative to the Board of Equalization?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
June, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Barca?
Yes.
Ms. Buckner?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
Dr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey?
Yes.
Mr. Hogan?
Yes, the motion passes. Congratulations to Mr. Townsend and to Mr. Lona, and I know our board secretary will get notification out to them here quickly. And then I believe the final, let me make sure. Yep, our final item is for our board secretary to read off our action items from tonight as her information comes up. Oh, it's not on here. Okay, yeah, apologies, Mr. Barca. This is my bad. Well, it's my bad. We're really accountable up here on the board. So we'll move into apologies into board member voice and turn it over to Mr. Barca.
Yeah, I think this is just a couple comments to my colleagues. I think importantly after last board meeting where we had the mother come and talk to us about the challenges with being a non-English speaker, right? And having the complex circumstance of having to present before a body that's entirely in English as a Spanish speaker. And I don't think we've had an opportunity necessarily to focus back on that and respond. And if nothing else, I think from me, and I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I heard it, I saw it, and I think one of the most important comments that was made as I stepped out to convey to the mother that we're listening was this issue may be solved for her, but how many other issues are out there that we have to solve? And so I'll follow up again from the conversation I think Dr. Bedell and I had after about where there may be opportunities for us to engage with some of these families directly, to understand how else we can serve this population of not just Latinos people necessarily, because there are other non-English speakers, and see how we can review some of the data that may exist that maybe we just need to take another look at. So I appreciate you all taking the time to hear that out, but I think that was important for us to convey publicly, as I know I've been contacted by several folks who watched that board meeting, and we're curious what we're going to do to respond.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Abarca.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, Ms. Buckner.
Yes. In addition to looking at the data and really like ironing out how we can get better at communication, I do want to note that, and I don't know that this needs to be solved or discussed right here, but Mr. Palacios mentioned that how traumatic this experience can be, and our lack of response because of the system that we have in place adds to that trauma. And so I think that we need to examine opportunities as a board to respond. So I don't know if that's in CCE or if we build out community chats. But we have to get better at responding verbally to our constituents.
Thank you, Ms. Buckner. All right, well, we will move right into the final item, which is a review of the action items from tonight. June?
So the first action item is from Ms. Buckner, and I'm not sure that I captured it completely, but she wants an explanation of data from page 20, looking specifically at the sixth grade assessment scores, and I believe that Mr. Rand has that written down, what Ms. Buckner is asking. Is that correct?
Let's make sure that we capture it, June, for you, so that as you push it over. So
Would you
I think
provide that for me?
maybe a reiteration of it.
Okay,
Yep.
I really just want a deeper data dive on sixth grade RTI data.
And you're looking for some contextual narrative, right, to help
Exactly.
illustrate, like, okay, what is going on in sixth grade that makes them look so much better than all the others?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. I don't want us to just get data, right? Like what's the story behind the data? Okay. Perfect.
Thank you. The second one is, how can we help parents understand the iReady data? The literacy data, how do our schools, I think this might be it, how do our schools doing RTI with fidelity? Oh, I didn't write that very good. How are they faring out? Is this a push with, if this is a push with Blueprint 2030, how are they doing by grade level?
So I'm looking for school data, specifically RTI targeted data. Dr. Collier, are you understanding the type of data that I'm looking for? Okay, thank you.
So it's understanding the progress with oral language and the progress toward data with pre-K students.
I'm looking.
How are the pre-K kids doing at this level? And what is early childhood and kindergarten readiness data that could be shared? Thank you.
Yes. Kindergarten readiness specific to early literacy.
And Ms. Cortez is going to send me an email, right? Thank you. Ms. Wolfsey wants to know how smooth was the transition, the process of enrollment was, and how did it work with summer school? We're looking at the enrollment data and how was it handled?
Yeah, just basically a narrative about how the enrollment for summer school went, as it is probably a precursor to how the fall will be.
Ms. Buckner asked again for the survey data for teachers. From the teachers, what's the survey from summer school on the data for teachers? And then Ms. Ford has asked, I don't know if this is the point, share the communications piece with summer school. Dr. Jackson took notes on that one. How are we communicating summer school?
All right, and that's it? I mean, that's a lot, yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know that we need to pile on anymore. Okay, well, Dr. Bedell, I'll turn it over to you to give us a preview of the business meeting on June 23rd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have several items here on the screen. Budget Amendment 2, 21-22. We will ask the board to take action on that. The approval of the FY 22-23 budget review and adoption. The A-List LLC in the amount of $1 million. CC Produce in the amount of $300,000. Belfonte Ice Cream Company in the amount of $1.1 million. And then the transportation route approval.
Great, all right, anything else for the good of the order? All right, we're adjourned, thank you, guys.